We never celebrated Thanksgiving for as far as I can remember. Please understand that I adore the concept. The fragrance of cinnamon and regrets in everyone's home. The food, the warm pandemonium. However, in my marriage, it turned into a custom to which I was not invited. Claire is my name. Up until a few weeks ago, I believed that my 52-year-old spouse and I were in a completely normal, healthy marriage. My husband of 27 years, Rick, is a down-to-earth individual. He was a touch emotionally sluggish, to be sure, but he never made me question his commitment. Each of us has its own rhythm, our internal humor, the quiet comfort of enduring friendship, or so I believed. Rick would travel for 3 days around Thanksgiving each year, much like clockwork, to visit his cousins up in Vermont. It was his specialty, something about their family usually spending the holidays up there. Skiing, drinking, whatever, he said, was a custom that dated back to his early years. And me? I remained behind. I was a little troubled by it at first. To be honest, during those early years, I would sort of pout while lugging the kids to my sister's place or roasting a turkey by myself. However, he was always so casual about it. He would say it was only custom. Not that he didn't love me or want to be with me. Only a few days, sweetie. You are aware of the situation. I adapted to it. Isn't that what we do? We make sense of it. Because confronting the strange feels like opening a can of worms we're not prepared for, we normalize it. Furthermore, Rick wasn't the theatrical, cunning kind. He's a straight-laced, punctual engineer who hates surprises. He hardly knows how to pretend that he like my meatloaf. Socks are folded by the man. He keeps track of receipts. I used to make fun of him for being too uninteresting to cheat, if anything. I poured myself a glass of wine and bid him farewell when he packed up with the same duffel bag each year and went to the mountains. 2, perhaps. For more than 20 years, it remained that way. Then something changed this year. It began modestly. Rick had a moderate case of COVID in early November. Nothing serious. But enough to eliminate the possibility of his yearly Thanksgiving vacation. He chose to stay at home and informed his cousins that he couldn't make it. To be honest, I was a little excited. We'd finally get to spend a real Thanksgiving together for the first time in 27 years. Perhaps I would finally get to enjoy things that other couples take for granted, like gorging our faces, watching football, and acting as though we don't criticize each other's pie selections. I made my own turkey roast, made the sweet potato dish my mom used to make, like we were entertaining the fucking president, set the table. I even lit candles. It seemed too unique. However, Rick? He seemed strange all day, agitated. He paced, barely touched his dish, and continued to check his phone. I assumed he was either grumpy from being unwell or sad about missing his cousins. I refrained from pushing. However, he vanished into the garage after dinner, simply disappeared. He was sitting in the car, of all places, chatting on the phone in that low, hushed manner. People used to hide things when I went to look for him while I was doing the dishes. I felt a tightness in my chest. I promise I wasn't trying to listen in. However, I heard his final words as I rounded the back of the car. I miss you too. Not seeing you today feels wrong. My heart ached a little. I refrained from confronting him immediately, trying to piece together what I had just heard. I stood there in the cold with my breath fogging up the garage window. I figured it might have been his sister. Perhaps it was a cousin I was unaware of. But that didn't sit right no matter how I twisted it. I asked him who he was speaking to later that evening. I acted as though I was unaware that he was lying. It was my cousin Jenna, he answered, flinching slightly. He whispered, "She's going through a difficult time. Her mother is in hospice care. The problem is that I've met Jenna. She is feisty, loud, and brutally honest. She wouldn't whisper about her mother's death. The thought of bourbon would make her curse God. Something clicked within of me. That night, I didn't get much sleep. I kept thinking about all the Thanksgivings he had missed. I always persuaded myself that this was okay, natural, even sweet him adhering to his traditions when I cooked and sat by myself. I hoped to be mistaken. I wanted to feel irrational, hormonal, and paranoid. However, I was also aware that the small voice inside of me, which I had been stifling for years, was suddenly yelling. I therefore did something I had never done before the following day, while he was out conducting errands. I pried. I went through his old notebooks, his office drawers, and even his email. Nothing at first. Only receipts from Costco and tax forms. I nearly gave up, but then I discovered an envelope in a dusty cabinet marked old manuals. Postcards were inside, dozens of them. Some were decades old, all aimed at Rick. The same address for returns, the same name, Charlotte. The messages were brief, teasing, known. Bring that awful brandy again next year. It's unbelievable that we've done this for 18 years in a row. I think about the cabin all year long. Others were more flirtatious than others. A few were almost romantic. They all made my stomach turn. Never in my life have I heard of a Charlotte. So I looked further. By some miracle or hubris, he hadn't logged out of his email when I took his laptop. It was hidden under a separate Gmail account that I was unaware of, rather than his primary account. Charlotte LHAD, a ton of texts in the inbox. A few recent, some dating back many years. Images of cabins coated in snow. Inside jokes. Discuss Thanksgiving dinners, a custom. Their custom. Then there was a picture of them, hidden in a thread from 5 years ago. Charlotte and Rick, arms around one another. By a hearth. His hand was on her knee as if it were supposed to be there. I was trembling as I scrolled through 27 years of treachery masquerading as a vacation with my family. A packed duffel bag and a straight-faced falsehood for 27 years. For her. What a damned ghost story his cousins were. I refrained from crying. Not immediately. I remained still, gazing at a life that I never seemed to comprehend. A marriage that never lived up to my expectations. I remained silent when he arrived home later that evening. I simply told him we needed to talk, poured him a drink, and smiled. Oh, and we will converse. I must finish the rest of this story first, though, since the worst part? I haven't even revealed Charlotte's true identity to you. Now, let's go back to when I told Rick that we needed to speak. He gave me that perplexed, somewhat worried expression he often gives me when he believes. I'm going to start an emotional conversation. You know the one. He looked up from his drink, which was bourbon, of course, since this man always plays the part of the sophisticated husband, even when he's lying through his teeth. His lips are tight, and his eyebrows are slightly lifted, as if he is already preparing for turmoil. Is everything all right? Casually, he inquired. I gave a nod. Indeed. Tonight, I just need a little honesty. Not much. He stiffened. I saw it, but not enough for a stranger to notice. Since we've been married for almost 30 years, I can tell when he's acting strangely. Our plates from the dinner I had worked so hard to prepare were still unfinished. As I sat across from him at the kitchen table. Stable, I put my hands on the table. Who is Charlotte? It was there. As if he hadn't heard me, he blinked. Then he laughed fake as hell, light, nervous. Who is Charlotte? I didn't respond. I simply stared at him, and I believe that's when he realized something was wrong. He parted his lips. I closed it, swallowed. Listen, Claire, it's complicated, but it's not. God, that phrase. I believe I chuckled. It wasn't humorous, but the sheer insolence of it caused my brain to officially short-circuit. Rick, it's not that complicated, I said quietly. Every Thanksgiving you've been with her. 27 years. And telling me falsehoods about it. So, feel free. Get started with the explanation. Like a child who had just been caught sneaking out past curfew, he lowered his head into his hands. I nearly felt terrible for him for a second. Nearly. At last he spoke. Before meeting you, Charlotte is someone I dated. My stomach turned at that. Date or cherished? Quiet. Then, my first love was her. High school. University. We spent 7 years together. I suppose she is the one who escaped. I had no idea what to do with that at all. I had been married to this man for half of my life, and he was still talking like a teenage boy with pimples who had never moved past prom night. He continued. She married first, then me. Relocated to Vermont. For a while, we lost contact. Then I met her at a conference around a year after we were married. We made up ground, spoke, and we simply continued to talk. I gazed at him. So, let me clarify something. You got back in touch with your ex-girlfriend a year after we said I do, and you just did what? Did you continue where you left off? He was decent enough to appear embarrassed. No, not in that manner. Nothing physical ever happened between us. We just had a conversation. Annually. Thanksgiving. Something broke inside of me at that very instant. You weren't by yourself during those holidays, Rick, I remarked, my voice trembling. They weren't spent with your family. You were with her throughout those times. That's something. Intimacy is that. That is dishonest. Then he began to babble about how they never went over a physical boundary, how it was customary, and how it only happened once a year, as though emotional betrayal were somehow less painful. This is the bit that truly got under my skin. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you, he replied, staring me in the eye. The irony. Oh, the man who created a whole holiday ritual around his ex-girlfriend and lied to me year after year like clockwork now wants to take credit for not hurting me. I refrained from screaming. I refrained from crying. That probably frightened him more than anything else. So you left me alone every Thanksgiving for almost 30 years, I remarked. Gave me the impression that I was an afterthought, as if I didn't belong to the club. And you were away playing house with Charlotte the entire time? It was, but he muttered something like, "It wasn't like that. Indeed it was. What's the worst?" It was always her name. Looking back, I see that he didn't hide her, but he also didn't bring her up. Occasionally, there were allusions. I thought it was a postcard from a family acquaintance that was in a drawer, a box of Christmas decorations that he insisted on keeping for himself, and an old photo that he had dismissed as college buddies. It turns out that half of them were mementos from the cottage they rented together. I didn't get any sleep that night. Rick slept next to me as if nothing had occurred, and I lay in our bed, my bed staring at the ceiling. I'm not sure how he accomplished that, how he continued to snore through the night while leading such a parallel life. I drove to my sister's house in the morning after calling in sick from work. She almost flung a coffee mug at the wall when I told her everything. The question I had been avoiding was then posed by her. What are your plans? And I spoke something I never imagined I'd hear myself speak for the first time in my life. I'm not sure, since I didn't. Yes, I was furious. Yes, heartbroken. Above all, though, I was confused. It felt as if I had woken up in a house that resembled mine, but was constructed on sand. I reflected on the years I had spent attempting to create a cozy house and establish customs with a man who was emotionally distant from me on a yearly basis. I recalled the times he held my hand, made love to me, and smiled at me all the while secretly clinging to someone else. I couldn't even decide if I was more upset with him or with myself for allowing it to continue this long. However, it became evident that I couldn't ignore this. I was unable to turn it off. Furthermore, I could never pretend that Thanksgiving was solely about football and turkey. No, it had to do with reckoning this time. For Charlotte's sake, not all she was an ex. The true holiday was her. The custom. I was simply the lady he returned home to. It took me 3 days to return home. When I spent the night at my sister Jill's house, I had to put up with a pull-out couch that had a broken spring, and her 2 Labrador retrievers breathing in my face. Even yet, it was preferable to resting in the same bed while my spouse dreamed about someone else. If you're wondering, Rick didn't blow up my phone. Not a single dramatic text. No monologues on voicemail. Just a kind "I hope all is well with you. Tell me when you're prepared to speak." I wasn't. I needed answers, though. After spending 3 days mentally reliving every Thanksgiving as if it were a cold case. Not the lies he told me at the table that evening. I desired everything. The terrible, shameful, unvarnished reality. I then returned home. It was a different house. Physically, things didn't change. It was still the same clean, split-level apartment with a subtle dog fur and lemon cleaner scent, but it seemed hollow, as if the soul had been removed by vacuum. I used to feel secure in my house. I didn't try out for the play, and now it felt like a prop. When I pulled into the driveway, Rick was seated on the porch. Not surprisingly, he was always able to play the good guy. Be patient, sad-eyed. Very please talk to me when you're ready. If you didn't know any better, it would almost seem plausible. I held up a hand as I got out of the car, but he stood. Don't. Not quite yet. He sat back down after nodding. I went directly to the office after entering. not to speak, in order to dig. Something about betrayal causes your brain to switch on. I never would have snooped through his belongings before this. I wasn't like that. I had faith in him. However, I came to the realization that night that I didn't know him at all. As a result, I ceased acting like the gullible wife. I began by looking at the filing cabinet. Just insurance documents, tax forms, and the usual middle-aged couple fare, nothing spectacular. I then unlocked the drawer. I was aware of his spare keys location. There's a shoebox inside. Yes, an actual shoebox. This man used the most cliched packaging possible to conceal his emotional affair. He is very traditional. Therefore, the box had printed emails, letters, pictures, and small notes. It came from the early 2000s in part. Their relationship was like going back in time. It was a relationship, too, regardless of what Rick claimed. They included letters from Charlotte thanking him for being her anchor, notes stating that this time of year will always belong to us, and this one really broke my heart, a picture of the two of them sitting in front of a fireplace, holding matching mugs, from around 15 years ago. It looked like the cover of some depressing romance book. I was sitting on our office floor, clutching decades of my husband's second life. Do you know how I felt, too? Relief. Not because I was content. Not even close. But because I had evidence that I wasn't insane at last. I wondered every Thanksgiving why he appeared so. Therefore, all of his justifications for not wanting to host, such as needing the quiet, now made sense. It has nothing to do with tradition or introversion. She was the focus. She always is. I approached him that night. His face fell when I dropped the shoebox on the table after bringing it into the kitchen. I said, I went looking, and I discovered what I required. He didn't dispute it. He simply nodded and averted his gaze, as if he were a man awaiting a decision. I said, You said it wasn't physical. I tapped the box and said, But this is more intimate than sex. Rick, you gave her your holidays, your heart. You offered yourself to her. He parted his lips, then closed them. Well done. So I have to ask now, I said. Did you ever intend to inform me? His voice was hushed when he eventually spoke. No, I wasn't. No hesitancy at all. He went on to say, I didn't want to lose you, as though that made it admirable. I retorted. But you also didn't want to lose her. Quiet. At that moment, I sensed this change within myself. As if something had broken, but not in a negative way. Like the reset of a bone. It hurts, but it's necessary. Are you in love with her? I inquired. He hesitated. Too much time. I'm not sure. A yes was better than that. I took the package, nodded, and walked out of the room. I refrained from crying. I had stopped sobbing. I was too worn out to cry. I just experienced this strange tranquility. It felt like I was finally waking up from an unconscious dream. I stayed in the guest room that night. I called a lawyer the following day. No, I haven't yet filed for divorce. However, I was curious about my possibilities. Because you don't just put a band-aid on something that has broken your world like this. You evaluate the harm. You create a map. You begin to move. I went into silent planning mode for the next week. I began compiling asset lists, verifying credit reports, and duplicating financial documents. Every Thanksgiving picture felt like a knife, and I even went back and pulled pictures of myself, my sister's kids, me alone at home, and me drinking wine and smiling while Rick worked late or needed time to recharge. The problem is that I wasn't spiraling. I was planning. I then came to understand something more profound than the betrayal. He did more than just lie. It's because I spent years lying to myself. I explained why he wasn't there. I pretended to be a calm, understanding, and cool wife. He was complex, thoughtful, and introverted, I told myself. That was a badge I wore. However, in practice, I was simply isolated. I sat at a table every Thanksgiving, missing something I couldn't identify. I could now give it a name. He was handing someone else my vacation time. I believed that I was the type of woman who could handle any situation. Powerful. Be patient. Devoted. However, I now doubt that woman ever existed. Perhaps I was simply afraid of being by myself. Or perhaps I didn't believe I was worthy of more. In any case, the woman is no longer there. And what is taking her place? She is still learning how to do it. She's not silent, though. She's also not sitting motionless. I stood in the center of my kitchen 2 weeks after I discovered the shoebox, staring at my coffee mug as if it were a sign from the cosmos. It didn't. It was only a cup. Despite the fact that both of my children had moved out years ago and almost ever contacted unless they needed anything, it proclaimed, "World's best mom." I detested that cup all of a sudden. I opened my laptop and tossed it in the trash. I had made up my mind to see her. Charlotte. I wasn't seeking conflict. I wasn't going to walk on her door like a character from a soap opera and say, "I know what you did." But for almost 30 years, I had to see the lady my husband had repeatedly selected. I simply needed her to be genuine. My marriage isn't being haunted by some ghost. It's not a postcard. Not a picture of a woman immobilized in a sweater next to a fireplace. I wanted her to be imperfect, a limp, a strange voice. She was human because of something. I Googled her, as any disdained wife in the 21st century would do. It turns out that Charlotte Blake was a private practice therapist in Vermont who had just retired. She even had a professional headshot on her LinkedIn site. Warm, blonde smile. The I make a living listening vibe. She was pleasant, articulate, and the antithesis of loud or combative, exactly the type of woman Rick would fall for. In other words, everything I wasn't when I was angry. She also conducted a few short grieving workshops for the community. Ironically, it felt exactly right on brand. She supported me in accepting loss while also assisting others in processing it. I spent a lot of time sitting with that. By looking at her picture, I pondered whether she was aware of me. If she were aware of the whole truth, that I was Rick's real wife, the one he returned home to while giving her the fantasy, rather than some resentful ex. At that point, I decided what to do. I sent her an email. I spent 2 hours perfecting the words. She wasn't threatened by me. Didn't make fun of her. It was brief, straightforward. "Hello, Charlotte. You've known my husband for a long time, but you don't know me. Claire is my name. I am Rick's spouse. After learning more about the nature of your relationship with him, I would like some woman-to-woman answers. Tell me whether you're willing to do that. I'm not seeking conflict. All I want is honesty. Something I haven't had for a while. Claire Carter." I nearly erased it. However, I sent it. The following day, she responded. It was unexpectedly polite. "Claire, I wondered when this time would arrive. I owe you a talk, and I'm not proud of the part I've played. I can talk to you on the phone, but I'm also open to meeting in person if that's more your style. Charlotte." I made my decision in person. I made the 4-hour drive to Vermont the next weekend. It was raining and overcast, as if everyone understood this was not the type of journey you do with the music blaring and the windows down. At a coffee shop by a park, I met her. It was one of those peaceful spots where the chatter was muffled by indie folk music and mismatched mugs. When I entered, she was already there, perhaps bracing herself as she stared into her cup. She stood up as soon as she spotted me. "Claire? Charlotte." We exchanged handshakes. I briefly saw a glimpse of the years, the mass. She also appeared worn out. It felt difficult for the first few minutes as we sat. Despite my intention to not sip my tea, I stirred it. As if she needed something to do with her hands, she unfolded and folded a napkin. I then posed the query for which I had traveled there. "Were you aware of his marital status?" "The entire time?" She gave a nod. "Yes." She spoke as if admitting it were painful. She went on, "I never pretended you didn't exist. However, he consistently gave the impression that your marriage was more about practicality than love, that you shared a room, companions, that he didn't stay because he had to." I laughed because it was such a great gesture, not because it was funny. The cheater's handbook's oldest trick. Disregard the spouse. Instead of portraying the affair as treachery, make it look like fate. I remarked, "We've been married for 29 years. I didn't share a room. His wife was me. That man became the center of my existence. And each Thanksgiving, he was with you while I waited for him to return home." Charlotte cast her gaze downward. "I understand. I also detested it. I told him not to come anymore. I urged him to make a decision. However, he never did." My eyes narrowed as I leaned back. "Did you adore him?" She paused. "Indeed. Yes, I did. However, I was also angry with him. That caught me off guard. She claimed, he used me to get away. When he was with me, he didn't need to mature. Nothing changed, as if we were trapped in this tiny snow globe. However, that was not reality. He brought neither his regrets nor his worry. He only brought his sentimentality. We sat quietly. Then she gave me a startled look and uttered something unexpected. You were worthy of better than either of us. Rick never said something as powerful as that. Since she was correct, she offered no justifications. I wasn't blamed by her. She didn't try to change history or grieve. It belonged to her, and I thought she meant it at that very time. I got up to go. I didn't let her stop me. Outside, the drizzle had intensified into a downpour. I didn't dash to my vehicle. I took a stroll, slowly. It was purifying. I didn't have any music playing on the way back. I didn't require sound. I had a thought. Almost anything. How Rick had been living two lives for almost 30 years. How Charlotte had allowed herself to be used as a crutch for emotions. And how, every Thanksgiving, I had sat in a chilly kitchen, trying to convince myself that I was sufficient. In actuality, though, it wasn't about being sufficient. It was about getting picked. And he didn't actually pick me. Comfort was his choice. He went with nostalgia. He made his decision. And now, I also have a choice. It was a peaceful day when I told Rick that I wanted a divorce. Don't yell. Don't cry. Just the conclusion of a lengthy statement that I had spent 30 years drafting. Like he always did when he wanted to appear serious without actually doing anything. He was sitting in the living room, watching a dull documentary about World War II combat. I'm done, I declared as I entered and stood in front of the television. He blinked. What have you finished? I took a seat on the other side of him. The union, the act of faking, everything. He looked at me as if I had spoken a foreign tongue. That's not what you mean. Yes, I do. He switched off the television, slowly, as if postponing it would somehow prevent the discussion from taking place. You said you just needed time, Claire. That was prior to my conversation with Charlotte. His expression changed. I bent over. Are you curious about how I vary from her? She acknowledged her actions. It belonged to her. You didn't. You haven't yet. I didn't intend to cause you any harm. I chuckled, couldn't resist. Rick, you have been causing me pain for 30 consecutive Thanksgivings. You simply didn't want to experience remorse over it. He sighed and sat back. That's it then? Are you discarding our entire existence? I'm not discarding anything, I declared. I'm reclaiming what is rightfully mine. In all honesty, I didn't feel victorious. I was worn out, as though I had just finished a marathon in wet sand. But there was something fresh behind that fatigue, a calmness of sorts. I wasn't requesting his approval. I didn't expect him to plead with me to stay. I had just finished. The following few weeks were a haze of difficult logistics, emails, and paperwork. Who owns the vehicle? The dog belongs to whom? Should we buy each other out or sell the house? Untangling 1,000 cables encased in festive ribbons and falsehoods was like that. However, I succeeded. The house was mine. There was no negotiating that. Rick said that if I gave up his retirement account, he would let me have it. I didn't flinch at all. We made it happen after I told my lawyer what I wanted. I refused to accept scraps from him and call it generosity. Building a life with someone makes you forget how much of yourself you've crammed into every nook and cranny. Your curtain preferences. Your assortment of mugs. Your habits. Even though he never read a page, he claimed to enjoy the books you kept on the shelf. I began removing those layers once he moved out. The walls were painted by me. I packed up old photos. Not with malice, but out of need. It was similar like going through your closet and discovering items of clothing that you never wore in the first place. And I began to speak, online as well as to friends. Long-term treachery caught me off guard when I joined a women's organization. I shared my tale. I read theirs. I also felt like I wasn't the only idiot in the room for the first time in a long time. As it happens, many of us have ghosts for spouses. We simply aren't aware of it till the mist clears. Every Thanksgiving, people questioned if they knew where their dad was and if I had confronted our children about it. No, is the response. They didn't. That's what Rick kept apart. That was in control. Even his lies had compartments, I suppose. I still haven't given them the whole story. One day, perhaps, when they are old enough, perhaps, they will be able to see individuals for who they truly are rather than simply what they want them to be. Charlotte? I didn't talk to her again. I didn't have to. She did what she was supposed to do. She told me the truth, and receiving the truth felt like a priceless treasure. After all the years, Rick tried to hide me behind emotional crumbs and half excuses. I am occasionally asked if I miss him, my spouse. I believe I miss the person I believed him to be, but there was no such man. Not at all. I contributed to the creation of that character, and the illusion vanished as soon as I let go of the pen. The strange thing is that I no longer feel angry. Yes, I was. God, I was angry. I desired to set everything on fire. I wanted him to experience my pain. Like an intoxicated driver with poor brakes, I wanted karma to crash through his life. Now, though, all I desire is serenity. After waking up, I would like to sip coffee from a separate mug without experiencing any bitterness. I want to laugh at a dumb TV show without feeling like I'm revealing my sorrow. I want to be able to go past couples holding hands without feeling empty. Being my own darn self is what I desire. I am too. I didn't spend Thanksgiving by myself last year. I was the host. Jill arrived accompanied by her spouse and children. Also present were a couple of coworkers. The kitchen was a complete disaster. The rolls were burned. Too loud a laugh. No one seemed to mind when the dog tipped over a tray of deviled eggs. I haven't had a better Thanksgiving in decades, because I decided how it looked this time. And I didn't miss the ghost of the man who used to vanish at that time of year, not even for a moment. So, yes, that's my tale. Sloppy, long, uncomfortably authentic, but now it's mine. I also owe no one anything for keeping quiet.